Omoyele Sowore is still not released as against what the court ordered. At least that is what we know before we stepped into the studio tonight. But calls have been made from about 50 civil society organizations asking the United Nations and the African Union to intervene in the federal government's case against the publisher of Sahara Reporters, Mr. Omoyele Sowore. They also want the international bodies to secure the activists' release. The groups include the Amnesty International, Media Rights Agenda, All Workers Convergence, and African Movement from Freedom and Justice. The CSO had filed an appeal on Sowore's behalf at the United Nations and the African Union on August the 23rd. This comes after one of the lawyers representing Sowore alleged that the Department of State Services repeatedly blocked a bailiff of the Federal High Court in Abuja from serving a fresh court order for his release. Mr. Adesina, let me ask you quickly. Are you worried about the public outcry over what is described as perhaps a disobedience to court order, as Mr. Sowore still remains in custody after the court asked him to be released in the face of the information that he has met all bail conditions? The president said at the United Nations that his government will respect the rule of law.
Yes, thank you, Seun. When you asked me to come here this evening to speak about the UN General Assembly, I told myself that Seun will not let me go without asking about Omoyele Sowore, and you have not disappointed me. It's an issue that is unraveling, and I think it's still in the realm of security and judiciary. The DSS have a spokesman in Peter Afunaya. If you had asked him this question, I'm sure he will be able to respond. As we are now, I think it's premature for the presidency to wade into this matter. When the presidency speaks, it should be the last and final position on things. At this point, I think it's more of the DSS that should respond.
You do know that the DSS, director of the DSS reports directly to the president as the chief security officer of the land. And some of this perception of disobedience to the rule of law or to court orders rubs off on the president, who is the leader and the #1 citizen of the land, who is supposed to protect the interests of all Nigerians. So I'm asking you, as someone who speaks for the president, are you worried about that has become a public outcry from Nigeria? Is the president worried?
No, well, I'm glad you corrected that question, because you asked whether I was worried. My feeling and my opinion does not really matter. Now, the president had been away. He came into the country yesterday. I have not been briefed. If he says this is our position on this matter, then I can speak on it. Because I've not been briefed, I will not be able to say much. But I'm sure that as a media house, if you try to speak with the spokesman of the DSS, he may oblige.
All right, I'm now being joined on the program by Mr. Jiti Ogunye, a lawyer, to give us some implications legally or what this means. There's been a lot of outcry on this matter. What is your take on what has happened in the frame of the rule of law? And when the CGN said 3-4 days ago that flagrant abuse of court orders will not be allowed, is this a case of such?
I think so, quite unfortunately. And I think that this ought not to happen, because when you exercise power, you can be firm, but at the same time, you can be humane in the way you exercise power. And this is a cliche now. Democracy is anchored on the rule of law. And the rule of law is trumped when a court gives an order, and that order is not obeyed, and excuses and pretexts are unfolded to obfuscate the issues, confuse the public, and dodge the obligation stipulated by Section 287 of the Constitution to obey that order. So it doesn't do anybody any good. I'm not pleased that this an additional order that is being disobeyed by this administration. And it's even more worrisome, because just as we are preparing to come to the studio today, another news broke that Shido Onuma a friend of mine from the university days when we were in NANS, you know, had just been picked up again by the SSS. Of course, the SSS will do its own work. But the climate that is emerging, quite frankly, is a climate of authoritarian intolerance. And that's contradictory in terms in a democracy.
Well,
because democracy...
Could you link, because now, I mean, I was asking Mr. Adesina about this. Apparently, maybe the president is not aware of what is happening. Could you excuse the president from this? Because these are security agencies doing their own work.
Look, may it never be our situation. May it never be our portion that our president will not be aware of what is going on in his country. They don't perish that thought. He's supposed to be briefed every other day.
But are you saying, Mr. Ogunye, that there is a possibility that the president is aware of some flagrant abuse, possibility of a flagrant abuse of court order?
The president,
in this case?
The president is aware of the situation. In any case, the SSS is part of the presidency. He is aware. Perish that idea that the president of a country will not be aware of what is going on in his country. I don't even see a spokesperson of the president coming out to say that the president is not aware. Because that would be a disservice. That would be an indictment.
Well,
that the president...
Could it be fair, Mr. Ogunye?
The president...
Could it be fair
the president's eyes and ears as big, and I'm speaking literally now, as big and as open as you can ever imagine. Much more than any other person in this country. Because he's in a vantage position to know what is going on in the country. And I'm saying that whether we've been told that he's not been briefed or he's not aware or whether he's aware, what is important is that this order is being violated. An indication has been given that there will be an arraignment tomorrow, but even before the arraignment, the fact that an arraignment is being awaited or anticipated is not a valid ground to disobey a court order. And let me just say this quickly. The SSS arrested Sowore, and about 5 days later, approached the court that gave that order of conditional release. It was not even bail. It was conditional release. The court gave that order because the earlier order he had granted, permitting the SSS to detain for 45 days, had elapsed. And an application for a further extension was withdrawn because the SSS told the court that a charge had been filed. And the court then said, since that order had elapsed and there is no new order, release him, but on the condition that he deposits his international passport and that when he's going to be arraigned, his lawyer will produce him. And I feel that there shouldn't be any difficulty in obeying that kind of harmless order, because if you go to a court to obtain an order to detain, when the court then says you should release, you must voluntarily, ordinarily obey such an order.
Let's take a breather. And up next, everyone, outcry over Sowore's continued detention and the issue of the rule of law and allegations of disrespect of court orders. We continue on that conversation and we'll wrap up our conversation with Mr. Adesina and Mr. Ogunye. Join us again, everyone. Welcome back, everyone. Let's get back to the conversation with Mr. Femi Adesina, President Muhammadu Buhari's media advisor, and Mr. Jiti Ogunye, a lawyer. Thank you so much for joining us, gentlemen. Let's get back to the conversation. Mr. Ogunye, I'll allow Mr. Adesina to respond to what you said. Is it fair, Mr. Ogunye, to say that this is a president that says that there will not be disobedience to rule of law or court orders? He said that, in fact, recently he said it in New York. When you link this to the president being aware of this, is it fair?
What is said is not as important as what is done. That's why it's ancient wisdom that action speaks louder than words. So the president can make commitment. He can make pledges. Political statements can be made. It's all about political correctness. I don't expect my president to go to the UN or anywhere and say that I will not respect the rule of law. But what are the facts on the ground? I'm saying that increasingly, there is a picture, there is a pattern, and that's disturbing. We want this president to succeed because if we wish him to fail, that would then mean that we also wish ourselves to fail. Nigeria
but to say that he's dictatorial, he's authoritarian, is it fair? This was a president who was a former military head of state and now a civilian head of government. Is it fair to say he's looking like there's an authoritarian tendency?
The president says often that he's turned a Democrat. He's a born-again Democrat. That in fact, there are many things he would have wished to do with dispatch that I couldn't do that. He had to obey the rule of law and all that. He says that often, right? And I use my words advisedly. I talked about authoritarian intolerance. I've not even talked about despotism. I'm saying that if a court says you must do, you cannot prevaricate over it. You cannot argue over it anymore. Do what the law says, more so when to legitimize and legalize that arrest and detention. You went to that court to obtain an order by an ex parte application. The court exercising its powers under the Constitution could have rejected that application and said, go and release him. I'm not going to give you 45 days. But the court granted 45 days. It then stands to reason that that same court, when he said release him, you have even every moral reason to obey that court. That's
Let's allow Mr. Adesina to respond to it. How would you react to these, Mr. Adesina, to some of the things that Mr. Ogunye has said?
Thank you. Well, I have followed Mr. Ogunye for years. I like his views. I like his opinions. But I've been scandalized this evening when he said, I said the president was not aware. Did I say that on this program? He stood what I said on its head. For what end, I don't know. I never said the president said he was not aware. What I said was that the president came to the country just yesterday and he may need to have full briefing. I never said the president was not aware. So he said he used these words advisedly. Those words he used earlier, quoting me, were inadvisedly. So, but be that as it may, this is an issue that is unraveling. It's in the realm of the judiciary and of security. The Attorney General of the Federation is the person that is best suited to respond to this. I speak for the president based on briefings I have received. And I said earlier, I have not been briefed on this matter.
Okay, I'll allow Mr. Ogunye to respond briefly, but let me quickly, before I allow Mr. Adesina and Mr. Ogunye to leave in this segment. Earlier in the week, the vice president, in what was seen as a very intriguing statement, responded over allegations flying around over issues allegedly linked to him. The vice president, Yemi Osinbajo, has declared his readiness to waive his constitutional immunity to clear his name against several allegations, insinuation, and falsehoods on his person and office. Professor Osinbajo made this declaration in a tweet he personally authored last week. He says, I will waive my constitutional immunity to enable the most robust adjudication of these claims of libel and malicious falsehood. What is this scenario pointing at? Let me allow Mr. Adesina and Mr. Ogunye to weigh in on this. Earlier today, Pastor Tunde Bakare, from a video that has been circulating online, says he will be the next president after President Muhammadu Buhari. He has reacted. Allow you to take a listen to him. In fact, he was even being tipped to replace Professor Osinbajo in some of those conversations online. Take a listen to his response.
God showed me a vision for Nigeria. I saw a rainbow across Nigeria with a word boldly written, reset, across the land. God's promises concerning this nation will be fulfilled. We will reset this country in the mighty name of Jesus. May the present overwhelming challenges, trials, afflictions, and all guilt by association be resolved in such a manner that God's name will be praised and glorified in him at the end whether or not he remains as VP to the end of his term. Somebody may say, so what do you say about the 16th presidency video? It is the true expression of my political aspirations. I'm unequivocal and unambiguous about that.
Let's conclude conversations on this particular segment. Let me allow Mr. Ogunye to weigh in on this one. Mr. Ogunye, what do you make of what is happening? The VP saying, I waive my immunity. You heard what Pastor Tunde Bakari said about the VP and how he's afraid of what could happen to him with what is presently happening that has been tagged travails.
You know, it's not about waiving immunity. The president, the vice president has every right to go to court to file a defamation suit. And this has been settled by the Supreme Court in 2 cases. These are notorious cases. Tinubu and IMB Securities PLC, reported in Nigerian Weekly Law Report, 16 Nigerian Weekly Law Report in 2001, part 740 at page 670. And the other case is the case that involved Governor Duke when he was in office. Was defamed and went to court against a company. And it's in the case of Global Excellence Communication Limited. And Duke also reported in part 1059. And the 2 authorities of the Supreme Court are saying that under Section 308, a person covered by immunity can go to court to file an action like the one envisioned by the vice president. And I will say that the vice president should be encouraged to do that, because too often people like me complain about the government resorting to criminal libel and defamation to silence critics. So if you defame somebody who is in government, right, and in the case of Atonwako and the state, the court had admonished politicians to resort to defamation suit rather than, resort to criminal libel and sedition. I think that it will be important for the development of the rule of law to encourage this kind of action so that those who are covered by immunity, that people think or assume will not resort to a civil action, can then file that action.
So they can file a civil action, but they cannot do a criminal action.
They can file. What I'm saying is that too often you have government, when scandalized or something has happened, resorting to sedition, criminal defamation and all that, in the criminal code and penal code, to arrest persons and charge them to court. I'm now recommending that it is better for those persons to file a civil action to get these persons, damnified in payment of damages.
But reality is that if you waive your immunity, that means you're resigning, isn't it?
It is not a waiver of immunity. I'm telling you that under Section 308, what the section says is this, and that's what the court has done. The section says that no civil or criminal action shall be instituted or continued against any person listed in this section or to whom this section applies during his tenure of office. The word is that no action shall be instituted or continued against him, not that he cannot institute. So
the VP can actually do that?
That's what the law says.
All right. Let me get...
and then, finally, let me just respond to what Mr. Adesina says. Look, I think he's doing a terrific job, almost difficult job. But what I've said this evening is in response to the question that was posed to me. And perhaps when the tape is rolled back, it will be realized that what I've done is to speak advisedly, as I've insisted. I'm quite grateful that he's saying that he's followed me for years and is familiar with my...
You are from Ondo State. He's from Ekiti State. Maybe
he's from Osun State.
He's from Osun State, rather. So you shared borders and probably resolve your issues.
There will be no boundary disputes.
Mr. Adesina, let's get your final word on this one. There's been a lot of issues. How will you respond to the politics of the Aso Rock Villa in the face of the dissolution of the economic management team, dissolution of the special presidential investigation panel, which the vice president set up? Also, we're understanding and we're hearing that some agencies that are reporting to the vice president have been reporting now to some other ministry. Also, vice president aides, we understand, may be approved for redeployment away from their MDAs. And there's so many issues, and there are insinuations outside of the villa. What is happening? Is there any breakdown of relationship between the VP and the president, your principal?
I'm glad that you used the word insinuations just now. Insinuations are what they are, insinuations. They are not necessarily true. They are not necessarily correct. Those of us who operate from the inside have not seen the alleged fissures, alleged crack between the president and the vice president. They are not there. We get surprised to read so many things published, but from the inside, I can confidently say there are no issues. The presidency remains one. The work continues. If there are some adjustments in practices and procedures, they are just things that are good for the country. They are things that are meant to position the government better and achieve results for Nigerians. So I don't see this. When I read all these things, I wonder where they get them from. And you see, typical of mob, you see that they have tried to descend on the vice president. And he's right if he decides to go to court. He's right. Because it's his name, it's his integrity that they are impugning. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mr. Femi Adesina, for coming on tonight. And Mr. Jiti Ogunye, thank you also for coming on tonight.